Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping the manhwa Baby Princess Through the Window. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it helps us a lot. Enjoy! Meet Damian Erveldote, Princess of the Erveldote Empire. When she was young, Damian enjoyed the luxuries of princess life, until one day, she was executed. Public sentiment turned violent toward her because they saw her as arrogant and indulgent. Even worse, she couldn't practice magic, so there were claims that she had no right to be a princess. In the end, Damian was sentenced to death. By her own father, no less. Can you believe that? Her dad stood by while she was executed, even approved the order himself. What kind of dad would do that? But Damian's story didn't end there, because after being killed, she woke up as her 5-year-old self. Isn't that crazy? Like any normal person, Damian thought she was dreaming at first. But life carried on just as it did when she was younger, being awoken by her maid and shepherded to meals. It didn't take long to realize that she'd acquired some extra abilities with this second chance. Now she can see status boxes above people's heads and even read their thoughts. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. Especially since Sarah, Damian's favorite maid, turns out to really hate her. I feel so bad for this princess. There really is no one she can trust. What's worse is that Damian doesn't have full control over this 5-year-old body. If she doesn't want to be hated and end up with her head in a basket, Damian is going to have to figure out how to get more control over this baby princess. And she's gonna need to do it ASAP, because her father, the emperor, the guy who literally sentenced her to death, is en route to the palace at this very moment. But in a shocking twist, Emperor Adrian's status box shows more affection for his daughter than anyone we've seen so far. Damian is totally stunned to see how much he favors her. It makes her wonder if maybe things will be different in this life. Overcome by emotion, the little princess rushes forward and grabs his coat. Uh-oh, is this going to turn his mood sour? Actually, no. Adrian thinks it's super cute. Though you wouldn't know it from his face. This guy looks so moody. It's no surprise Damian is doubting whether the status windows are real or not. I mean, look at him. Does that face say adorable and loving to you? The grown-up Damian has so many things to say to her father, but once again, the 5-year-old takes over and she ends up screaming, "Red!" Nice one, bestie. That's really gonna turn things in your favor. The Emperor's butler suggests that Damian is asking to have dinner with him, which is not wrong. What she was trying to say was that they should have tea together, so close enough. And even better, it earns her loads of favorability points. While getting ready for their dinner, Sarah is especially harsh brushing her hair. Meanwhile, another maid by the name of Ellie, who Damian always thought of as hateful and strict, turns out to have a soft spot for the princess. It seems like everything's in reverse. All the people who seem to like her are mean, and all the people who are mean are actually worried for her. When she finally arrives at dinner, Damian is worried. There's a lot of pressure on her to be polite and earn the favor of her father and brother, who decided to join them. Apparently, the crown prince, her older brother Damian Erveldote, was always cold and indifferent in her past life. Probably because he's the legitimate son of the emperor, while she was born out of wedlock from the emperor's harem. The three of them sit down for a very awkward meal. But even though Damian isn't doing anything, her father's favorability continues to rise. And the even bigger surprise is that Damian's status box is also really positive. So positive, in fact, that he seems kind of obsessed with her. Despite the awkward silences, the emperor is very kind during the meal, worrying about his daughter's health and telling her to eat her fill. Damian is torn. As a princess, she's been told to watch her weight and never eat too much, or else it will ruin her image. Which is totally gross, but I guess it's just that kind of kingdom. But seeing how much joy it gives her father, the princess gives in. So overall, the dinner is a success. But trouble starts again the moment she returns to her room. Horrible Sarah immediately scolds her for eating too much, and says the queen is angry with her for overindulging. Apparently, the people in this palace are so sick and twisted that sometimes they lay traps and tests for her. It looks like the dinner tonight was one of them, designed by the queen to check her self-restraint. They even decide to punish her by not giving her any meals tomorrow. What the heck kind of backward society is this? I can't believe they're being so mean to a little 5-year-old. The next morning, Sarah doesn't come in like usual to wake her up. Poor Sherbian's stomach still hurts from overeating last night, but she doesn't want to lay in bed. One of the things people berated her for in her past life was being lazy and indulgent, so she has to be more attentive this time. Soon, Ellie arrives with news that the Emperor has something to tell her. Sherbian thinks it's about her behavior at dinner, but then a group of maids comes running into her room. They get down on their knees and start crying, begging for her forgiveness and saying it was all Sarah's fault. I have no idea what they're talking about, but Sherbian can see that despite their acting, none of them is actually sorry. Honestly, is there not a single nice person in this palace? Actually, Ellie seems to have genuine concern for the princess and tries to chase the girls out so she can get some rest. Then suddenly, the Emperor himself shows up, and he seems mad as heck. He orders all the servants to be locked in the dungeon for the crime of not looking after his daughter properly. But when he takes Ellie too, Sherbian has to speak up. She wants to explain how Ellie has been the only one looking after her, but the 5-year-old takes over and she sort of just cries. Kind of relatable, honestly. Moved by his daughter's tears, Emperor Adrian promotes Ellie to become Sherbian's personal maid. Finally, another win! Maybe she should be worried about what's going to happen to all those mean maids, but I can't blame her for enjoying this small victory. After the whole mean maid fiasco, the Emperor takes his daughter to the gardens for some tea and cake to check on her well-being. She can't really enjoy it because she's super stressed about how to act and keep his favor. I mean, who wouldn't be? If I'd gone through everything she had in the last 24 hours, I think I'd give it up by now. And again, she has the pressure of deciding whether to eat or not. Seriously, this is so messed up. How could a 5-year-old already be thinking about her weight? Let the girl eat cake already! Luckily, her dad guesses her concerns and tells her to eat comfortably, promising to keep her table manners to himself. She gives in and has a macaron, watching his favorability points go up literally thousands just watching her eat. I don't know how this guy ended up executing his daughter. He's literally whipped for her. She accidentally eats too many, but then her dad offers her cake too and even uses his magic to make it nice and cool. All that is sweet, but the best thing her dad has done is fire Sarah. Now that Ellie is her personal maid, she seems a lot happier and smiles more. They get her all dressed up for a meeting with the queen, Alderuan Erveldote. In her past life, Queen Alderuan was always kind and gentle to Sherbian. But if we've learned anything so far, it's not to trust how people acted in her past life. And what do you know, the queen is just the same. Her favorability is literally in the minus thousands. Even just at the sight of Sherbian makes her upset. I have a feeling we've just met the real villain of this series. Despite how hateful her thoughts are, the queen is all smiles and niceties. She's totally fake, acting all concerned over the incident with Sarah, and even pretending to take responsibility herself. It's actually scary how two-faced she can be. When Sherbian admits she and the Emperor went to his private garden, the queen's favorability plummets. It's pretty obvious that she's trying to steer the princess away from her father, since she keeps telling her he's a scary man and saying she should come talk to the queen instead. I guess that's because she's the child of a concubine. She poses a threat to the queen's true-born son. Maybe that's why she hates her so much. Speaking of her son, Damian makes appearance, at which point the queen promptly kicks the princess out. In front of his mother, Damian acts cold and cruel like usual, even though he was very fond of her at dinner the other day. I actually don't know how Sherbian does it. Even with the status boxes, it's impossible to tell how anyone really feels. I'm confused just reading it. When Sherbian returns to her chambers, Ellie's made her a special cake to cheer her up. But the poor girl is so turned around after meeting the queen that she can't eat it, and starts crying instead. Ellie gives her a hug and tells her there's nothing wrong with eating what she wants. She's a literal child after all. She needs to grow. After Ellie convinces her that eating is good, Sherbian's body and soul synchronization jumps up 2%. Damn, I wish my life worked like that. Imagine if every time you ate cake you literally leveled up. That would be amazing. In the next few days, Sherbian's life improves dramatically. She's much more relaxed and able to communicate a little better with Ellie, who is getting very fond of her baby princess. While on a walk, Sherbian has a sudden recollection of one of the incidents that led to her execution. In her past life, a carriage passing through the slums tipped over. One of the trash bags tore, revealing all the fancy food that no one ever ate. It caused an outrage, and a rumor immediately sparked that it was all from the princess. But all Sarah ever fed her was cold soup and bread. So where did all that fancy stuff come from? In the end, Sherbian was blamed, so that's why she's still so stressed about her public image around food. Determined to put the rumors to bed, the princess ventures over to the palace kitchens. They arrive to find the kitchens deserted, and although dinner hasn't been served, there are almost no ingredients. So then, how did that rumor start about the food waste? It can't have come from the princess's palace kitchens. That place has more dust than food. Anyone else starting to get real suspicious of where that nasty queen fits into all of this? While she's having a snack, she reads Ellie's thoughts and discovers that her sister is very sick with malaria. It gives Sherbian the motivation she needs to change things. After all, she's been given a second chance. This time around, there'll be no food waste incident and no sick sisters. While wandering through the grounds, she stumbles upon a door that leads to a gorgeous flowery garden and finds a boy about the same age as her inside. He's wearing a very fancy robe and has blonde hair and silver eyes. She puts the pieces together and recognizes him. That boy will one day grow up to be Karmen, Lord of the Magic Tower. Karmen came from the slums but had a great affinity for magic, so he became a disciple and worked his way up to become the owner of the tower. Probably because of his origins, he always hated the princess. In fact, he was the one to carry out her death penalty. Damn, can't she ever just meet a janitor or something? Why does everyone she bumps into have something to do with her death? Give the girl a break. At this point, Karmen is just a pupil of the tower, and he doesn't seem to hate her. Actually, just like her brother and father, his first thought is that Sherbian is super cute. He even invites her to sit down and enjoy the garden, his personal hideout. He seems really excited to have a visitor, and even gives her special permission to come back anytime. Quite the contrast from the cold-hearted man who grew up to literally execute her. The two of them start walking together, and Sherbian admits she's looking for a little yellow flower by the name of Kasha. Every time she describes it, her favorability points go up. I guess there's some benefits to being 5 and adorable. Because he doesn't want her to walk alone at night, Karmen agrees to come with and help her search for the flowers. They soon find it and grab a few by the roots, since the princess wants to eat them. I'm starting to seriously judge her taste in food, but apparently, it can be used as a medicine to help reduce fever. Karmen seems worried about handing a flower with medicinal properties to a 5-year-old, which is actually pretty sensible. I mean, you wouldn't just hand a box of pills to a kid, would you? What Karmen doesn't realize is that the kasha flower has an extra special effect on child fevers, which makes it the perfect antidote for Ellie's younger sister. He hands them over and then asks why she's not having magic lessons. He reveals that he can sense how high her mana affinity is, and hers is really strong. Which is news to Sherbian. Since she was born, she was always told she had no magical powers at all. So either Karmen is lying, or someone has been plotting a much more serious scheme. Karmen assures her it's the truth, but right now, the princess is more focused on her 2 tasks. She's got the flower to save Ellie's sister, so now she needs to address the food waste incident. Karmen knows that the trash gets taken out at the south gate, and he shows her the way. She asks him to keep this whole thing a secret, and the young wizard agrees, but only on the condition that she promises to learn magic from now on. Aw, I'm starting to like this guy. He really wants the best for her, and as we've seen, that's a pretty rare trait around these parts. When Ellie starts calling for the princess, they part ways, promising to meet again. Sherbian returns to her maid and hands over the kasha flowers. She sends them home to her sister, and a few days later, reports back that the fever has broken. So with one task completed, she moves on to the other. Sherbian is hoping to find clues about the food waste at the south gate, but there's already a large group of people heading that way, including the Emperor. She bumps into him, and he acts chill, even though he 100% only came this way because he was hoping to catch her. Even just seeing her in her pretty little dress immediately adds 100 favorability points. At this rate, Sherbian is going to have to smile at him like once a week, and she'll earn enough points to avoid execution. Trying to gain even more affection, she grabs onto his cloak just like before and asks him to come with her. I assume she only wanted a bit of company, but as usual, he rolls out the red carpet and organizes an entire picnic just for her, with more food than anyone could stomach. What I wouldn't give to get that kind of treatment. I know she's had a hard life or whatever, but she's certainly making up for it the second time around. After a few snacks, he shows her around the southern area of the garden, including the stables where the carriages are stored. She makes a beeline straight to a carriage with a suspicious black bag inside. On her father's orders, they carry it out to discover an entire bag full of uneaten food. Exactly the thing she was looking for. It's a good thing she caught them in time, before that bag went out to the slums and destroyed her reputation. But now, there's the question of where it all came from. One of the stable boys suddenly appears, and his thoughts give him away. Clearly, there's some kind of scheme going on, and the Emperor knows it. He demands the stable boy be interrogated, and until then, her father tells her not to worry. He even picks her up for a cuddle. I think that's a sign that Operation Don't Get Executed at 18 is going pretty well. The next day, the princess's flag is found on the stable boy, so the Emperor bursts into his daughter's chamber to investigate. He asks straight up if she's been turning down food, and Sherbian panics, worried that things are going to go just the same as in her last life. When her father spots the macaroons on her table, she bursts into tears, admitting that she took them from her picnic yesterday. Although, I don't know what's so wrong with that. Honestly, this palace is so weird. Girls shouldn't overeat, but they should have picnics. She can eat her fill but not save any for later? I'm so confused. While Sherbian is crying, Ellie gets on her knees and tells the Emperor there's hardly any budget coming to the princess's palace. Adrian looks like he doesn't believe a word of it, but luckily, his accountant comes in at just the right time to confirm their story. The kitchens are empty of food or maids. As Ellie explains, ever since she became head maid, the princess's palace hasn't received any proper support. That's why she took the leftovers from the picnic, and also why the food waste couldn't possibly have come from them. Yeah, Ellie, you tell them. The Emperor is convinced, and does the only thing he knows how to stop his daughter crying. That's right, he brings in more tea and cakes. As more information comes to light, it's revealed that Ellie even used her own salary to try and feed the princess when the money ran out. She must have been too scared of the Empress to speak up, since the internal affairs of the palace are her responsibility. See, I'm telling you, everything points to that witch. The Emperor apologizes to his daughter and finally confronts his wife. Obviously, she denies the whole thing and says she has no idea any of this was happening. The princess walks in on their argument and gets dragged into it when the Empress asks her to vouch for her character. Honestly, if it was me, I would not hold back. I mean, she can literally read her mind and see that she's guilty. Now Sherbian is in a difficult position, and the queen is really laying it on thick. She even starts crying, looking all pitiful while in her mind, she's tearing Sherbian to shreds. How can a person be so two-faced? Overwhelmed by the pressure, the princess stands beside her father, tugging on his cloak. A classic move, guaranteed to win her victory. And just like in the past, it wins the Emperor over. He picks her up, relieving the tension and making the decision himself. He decrees that the queen will no longer be allowed to manage the palace's finances, basically taking away her only real power as a ruler. The queen is not happy about this. She tries to resist the order, but her husband takes her protest as a sign of her undermining his authority. And with an emperor this arrogant, that's just not going to slide. So she backs down, and for the first time in both her lives, Sherbian sees the queen in defeat. Although foiling her schemes is a victory, Sherbian can't rest easy. It's the queen after all. If she's been beaten once, she'll only come back harder. Later that day, the princess is having snacks when her dad drops by to visit, calling her Sherby as a cute little nickname. Aww. It's very sweet, but honestly, I still find it hard to believe. Is this really the same guy who signed her death warrant? Am I the only one who feels a little suspicious? Anyway, the Emperor and his butler wanted to continue investigating the case, but in a shocking turn of events, Sarah, the ex-maid, and the stable boy all committed suicide while in prison. Seems more like the queen cleaning up her mess to me. Even though he suspects his wife, the Emperor ends up pinning it on Sarah and the agent responsible for handling the queen's budget, who is punished accordingly. which means sweet little Sherbian finally gets to kick back and relax for once. And really, she deserves it. I mean, who else could solve a palace mystery and save a child's life in the body of a 5-year-old? Eat all the macarons you want, bestie! In the aftermath, the princess's kitchens are full of food and staff again, and Sherbian got a whole new wardrobe too. And the best part is that the princess and her dad now have breakfast together every morning, a perfect opportunity to increase her favorability. He even got special-made utensils for her to use that fit her baby hands. Wow, she really has him wrapped around her finger. The emperor is so whipped that he carries her back to her room after breakfast. After a nice long nap, she goes out to explore the palace gardens, which have also been revamped and are now full of flowers. She has a whole new host of maids too, and these ones seem way nicer. Although that's not exactly hard, just so long as they don't starve her, beat her, and brainwash her to hate her dad. One of the new maids, Jane, is accompanying Sherbian on her walk. So far, she seems to be very fond of the princess. While Sherbian is off wandering by herself, she bumps into her brother, Damian. Will this finally be the moment that he picks a side? It's been hard to tell where his loyalties lie so far. Before we can find out, the perspective switches, and suddenly, we are with Hex, the Emperor's assistant. Personally, he's been struggling with the Emperor's investigation of the Queen. As it turns out, their marriage was a little rocky from the start. You see, it was really a political alliance forged after the war. Everything was part of a contract, to the point that their heir, Damian, was even created by magic. However that works. But all along, the Emperor's heart was with Sherbian's mother, who we haven't heard much about up until now. So why do I get the feeling that's about to change? Meanwhile, in the gardens, Sherbian is hoping to politely avoid her brother when he suddenly opens up. It seems like his behavior the last time they met has really been bothering him. He apologizes for acting that way and asks if they can hang out more in the future. Kind of an awkward way of talking to your sibling, isn't it? Can you imagine a brother turning to his sister and politely asking to spend more time together? Mine just used to yell at me when we were kids. Anyway, because she's sweeter than pie, Sherbian forgives him and agrees to spend more time with him. Though she probably wasn't expecting him to show up at her bedroom the very next morning. She's a little frightened of him still and hides behind Jane's dress when he arrives. But Damian actually came to bring her a cake, one especially made for her. By now, we know the quickest way to Sherbian's heart is through her stomach. And indeed, all seems pretty much forgiven, especially after he conjured up little edible bunnies to go on top of the cake. I'm not gonna lie, that would get me too. Can I get a brother like this? They each have a slice while Sherbian watches her favorability go up and up and up. It's quite the contrast from her past life, where they hardly spoke and always acted awkward. Admittedly, he still acts a little strange these days. Damian even warns her that he might be rude and cold again in the future, and asks her forgiveness if he has to act like that sometimes. Sounds kinda shady to me, but while Sherbian has cake in front of her, anything goes. The next morning, both Damian and her dad are present for breakfast, even though the prince wasn't technically invited. He acts like he just wanted to have breakfast with the Emperor, but it's pretty clear he came to join the Sherby fan club. Although honestly, they're more like rivals than fans. When the Emperor hears about the cake, he gets kinda competitive. Both of them are so similar, it's no surprise they'd end up fighting for her affection. While they're arguing about cake and sweets, Sherbian still has her eyes on the horizon. She can't forget how quickly everyone turned on her in her past life, and knows it won't be easy to avoid trouble this time around. Besides her perceived arrogance, the other big crimes she was framed for were treason and using dark magic. Her enemies even went so far as to plant items in her palace, which means they're dedicated. Sherbian can't relax just yet. While in the garden, the Emperor approaches and offers to take her on a walk. It's cute that this guy is trying to get close to her, but doesn't he have a country to run? Breakfast, walks in the garden. Shouldn't an emperor be a little busier than this? This time, he has a gift too. A statue of an angel riding a horse. I guess he heard about Damian's cake toppers and wanted to one-up him. Obviously, she loves it, and after giving her thanks, he gives her permission to wander through the Emperor's private garden at her leisure. Sherbian starts visiting every day for the wonderful flowers. One day, she spots her father working outside and ends up sitting with him eating, you guessed it, a whole plate of sweets. While she's chilling with her dad, Hex appears suddenly with urgent news from the palace. He seems nervous to talk in front of the princess, but the emperor commands him to speak. He tells them that one of their citizens just entered the kingdom of Garambel on the west coast and is begging for their help. Apparently, some kind of medicinal shipment was on the way to Garambel when it was attacked. The bandits captured the driver and burned all the ingredients. You see, originally there were 4 empires in the land. Erveldote is now the only remaining one, and lots of little kingdoms sprung up to fill the space of extinguished empires. In the last Great War, the emperor conquered them all, but in the decades that followed, several kingdoms have perished due to various disasters. The western kingdom of Garambel was nearly one of them, and has been struggling with leprosy for years. That's why they were transporting special medicinal ingredients to the kingdom. Hex advises the emperor not to send another shipment. Storm season is about to begin, which means the cost and scale of sending further supplies will only be a loss to the empire. Financially, it makes sense. But Sherbian remembers from her past life that once the empire stopped supplying the kingdom, the plague spread faster than anyone imagined and wiped out the entire nation in a fortnight. Oh gosh, isn't that too much pressure for one little girl? How is she supposed to communicate all of that to her father without giving herself away? Instead of getting into a heavy conversation about socioeconomic benefits of aiding neighboring territories, Sherbian does what 5-year-olds do best: look cute and act sweet. She reminds her dad that helping others is important, worried that he'll scold her for interfering in politics. And the emperor is stern when he responds, asking if she understands how much another shipment would cost the empire. Obviously not, dude. She's literally 5. Even so, Sherbian does her best to use what language she has to convince him. And just like that, her dad agrees. Wow, he really is a pushover. Is this how all world leaders make decisions, taking the advice of their kids? Anyway, somehow Sherbian ends up at the top of all of this. The emperor orders more supplies to be sent to Garambel, and even rewards his daughter for having the courage to speak up. I guess it's no surprise that people start talking about the emperor who was swayed by a child. Word gets out fast, and soon Sherbian's name is back on the public's lips. And we know how that went last time. Sherbian doesn't like the attention, so she tries to hide inside the palace as much as possible. It's a good time to be keeping a low profile since the snowstorm season is due to start soon. Around this time, temperature drop and monsters get stronger, so a lot of people stay inside. But that also means she can't go and see her dad. Ellie, her maid, notices how down she seems these days. Reading her thoughts, Sherbian sees her think about reporting this to the emperor, so she does her best to keep Ellie by her side. She doesn't want to worry her father, especially when he's so busy now sorting out the Garambel shipment. One morning, Sherbian gets a surprise visit from Hex, who brought some bad news. The plague has spread through Garambel just like she feared, and is wreaking havoc on the kingdom. I can't believe it! After everything she did, history still repeated itself? Sherbian looks like she's about to cry, but Hex reassures her that her shipment did make it to the people in time. Though the plague is still rife, they now have the full support of Erveldote, and it's all because of Sherbian. She saved their lives! The sweet little princess is delighted to hear that she was able to help others. Then the emperor himself arrives all in a huff. He heard that Sherbian hasn't been eating and came straight away. She reassures him everything is fine and tells him not to worry. She doesn't want to bother him while he's so busy. Then her dad goes all soft and tells her she's never a bother, which, I have to admit, is kind of adorable. So she tells the truth. Actually, she doesn't like eating alone. She knows her dad is busy, but asks if just sometimes they could eat together. For some reason, this really presses the emperor's buttons. Clearly, there's been some miscommunication down the chain of command. It's not like he was never going to eat with her again. It was only a temporary arrangement. He looks like he's about to murder one of his staff members, so Ellie steps in and admits that she may not have communicated clearly enough. Gosh, so much drama over miscommunication. What is with this family and making everything so intense? It's just breakfast, people! In the end, her father promises to have breakfast with his daughter when he can, and asks her not to skip meals when he's away. In the meantime, Sherbian still sticks mostly to her palace because of all the attention she's gained. When she does go outside, it's to hunt for whippet, a special flower that only blooms in storm season. It's kind of exhausting, though, being able to read everyone's thoughts about her. There are all sorts of rumors flying around, some good and some not so good. While she's ducking and dodging public opinion, The Emperor and his team are getting suspicious about the strength and origins of the latest outbreak of leprosy. Though they can't prove much, it seems man-made. So the Emperor orders his court chief to secretly investigate the few leads they have and report back. Obviously, Sherbian doesn't know about any of that. She's spending more and more time inside, waiting for the blizzard to pass. Although there is one thing to look forward to: her birthday. Sherbian's birthday lands right in the middle of storm season. Kind of a bummer, right? In her past life, her 6th birthday was a miserable affair. She didn't have a party or any kind of celebration. Actually, people just acted like it was a normal day. All at the hands of the queen, of course. Maybe this time she can change things? After all, doesn't the little girl who saved the Garambel nation at least deserve a party? Actually, the maids are planning something. This is one of those times where being able to read minds kind of sucks, since Sherbian can see the surprise they're planning for her. But I guess it's the thought that counts, right? As usual, Sherbian is more occupied with thoughts about how to secure her spot in the palace so that, no one decides to execute her this time around. She asks Jane to take her to the royal library, determined that if she can't use magic, at least she can become smart and useful to the Empire. The only problem is, she's not supposed to know how to read yet. Only 5, remember? She asks Jane to stand outside so she can read, and they head off together. But before they reach the library, they bump into a stranger with dark red hair. He introduces himself as the magician Antonio, at which point Sherbian has a sudden memory of him accusing her of dark magic in her former life. Even now, his intentions are murky. By reading his thoughts, it's clear that he's only being nice to the princess to get closer to the Emperor. The memory of her horrible past life is so upsetting that she ends up fainting. When she comes to, her dad is by her bedside and has already had her checked over by a doctor. Because, of course he has. It takes Sherbian a moment to realize she's still in her younger body and not being persecuted in her memories. She reassures her father that she's not ill, just scared, so he immediately storms off to confront magician Antonio. But since our beloved Emperor has literally no chill, he goes from 0 to 100 real quick and locks the magician up, having him beaten to reveal what he did to his daughter. Oh, and Damian is there too for some reason. Do we know how old this kid is? Should he be hanging around an interrogation chamber? This looks like it's going to get nasty. Meanwhile, the doctor is doing everything he can to cure the princess of what is clearly just a very long anxiety attack. Everyone seems so worried, and though she doesn't know it, some people's lives are very much on the line. So Sherbian drinks the medicine provided, even though it tastes disgusting. Her dad is about to strangle the doctor for giving his precious princess a gross drink, so she forces herself through the whole thing and pretends it's yummy. Ugh, this poor girl. After the whole medicine fiasco, the interrogation of Antonio has actually turned up some dirt. The Emperor trusts his daughter's instincts, so even though he literally just said hi, he had the magician investigated and discovered he's been kidnapping kids. Okay, that's obviously horrible, but can you believe how lucky she is? That means another of the main villains in Sherbian's story is off the books before she's even a teenager. The Emperor commands his men to find and return the missing children, and also orders that anyone from the magic tower related to Antonio be investigated. Meanwhile, Sherbian is plagued by fears of her past life repeating. Determined to find some way to protect herself, she steals a few of the gems from her dresser and hides them in her teddy bear. I don't know how she plans to escape when she's only 6, but that's our girl. Always plotting. The next morning, Ellie brings the princess a list of furnishing options so that they can redecorate her room. Now that the budget dilemma has finally been solved, Ellie is determined to make the palace all beautiful and sparkly for her. Looks like the boys might have competition for the top member of the Sherbian fan club. Because running the country is apparently no big deal, the Emperor walks in as usual. He came to check in on his daughter since she's been staying inside again lately. He also hops on the furniture bandwagon, trying to lavishly shower her with gifts. When Sherbian insists that they shouldn't waste money on such expensive furniture, he decides to just give her the budget instead. Right, because giving a child a load of money is a great idea. That definitely won't backfire. Then they move on to the topic of the long-awaited birthday party, which he's already been making grand preparations for. When he made the announcement to his ministers, a young man by the name of Hannibal Parkour stepped forward. which, by the way, is one of the weirdest names I've ever heard. But anyway, Hannibal is from one of the most prestigious clans in the Empire. Maybe that's what gives him the courage to stand up in front of the Emperor and tell him there are more important things than his daughter's birthday party. Uh-oh. Nice to meet you, Hannibal. Hope you had a nice life. The young Duke seems to think the situation in Garambel is too severe to be holding a party right now. With the plague still raging, it would be insensitive to hold such a big celebration. It would be a fair point if news didn't arrive at that exact moment proclaiming that the plague had recently eased. Talk about taking the L. Besides, since the princess is the one who ordered the extra shipment of medicine, it seems like a birthday party would be really appropriate right now. But blowing up against the Duke in front of his council is likely to make rumors fly about the Emperor's judgment. After that tense council meeting, the big day finally rolls around. Once she hits 6 years old, her body and soul synchronization improves even more. Ellie gets her all dressed up with the shiniest jewels so that when the Emperor himself arrives, he is bowled away by her cuteness. But the celebrations go further than just fancy outfits. Apparently, royal birthdays are traditionally celebrated for 3 whole days. That's 3 days of Sherbian basically being worshipped and showered with affection. Quite the contrast from her previous life. When she arrives at the Imperial Palace, Sherbian is greeted by her father, who immediately presents her to a grand hall of prestigious guests. So, no pressure or anything. Like any young child in a room full of strangers, she starts to cry. So her dad uses his magic to comfort her and hide the others from her view so she's not so stressed. He takes her out to the gardens, where they dine on her favorite sweets before the arrival of the Grand Witch herself, Queen Siabel, who looks just as stunning as usual despite her rotten personality. And this time, her favorability is at an all-time low. I guess that's to be expected after the food waste scandal put her out of the Emperor's favor. The uncomfortable trio sit together and greet the guests, the first of whom is the master of the magic tower, Master Trana. I guess Karmen must have talked her up, because this guy already likes Sherbian, like, a lot. And just like Karmen, he mentions Sherbian's mana levels. Apparently, even the master of the tower can see that she's just bursting with magical potential. So why has she never been trained before now? I assumed it was something to do with the queen, but if the Emperor knows too? Ugh, the mysteries never end. The Magic Tower Master tries to impress on the queen just how special the princess is, but the Emperor cuts him off. He says something about how mana levels can transform and change at will. Honestly, it's all pretty confusing, but clearly they don't want her to start learning until they're sure her potential will stay that way. Maybe that's why she didn't learn in her past life? Because her mana levels dropped over time? The whole thing gets even more complicated when Sherbian catches her father thinking about her mother's last words. Something about wanting a child to enjoy their childhood? Ah, that makes a lot of sense. Avishur's last wish must have been for Sherbian to have the freedom to play and enjoy her youth. But that seems kind of bogus to me. She has the potential, so she should use it. After that whole encounter, Damian finally shows up, and the party is in full swing. All the high-ranking nobles from her previous life come to praise and greet her, and actually, most of their status windows are positive, so she must be doing something right. Her dad is enjoying passing her cake after cake in between the guests, until the queen gently suggests Sherbian stop filling up on sweets. For once, I kind of agree with her. I don't think we've seen this girl eat anything other than cake and macarons. I feel like a vegetable or two wouldn't go amiss. As you'd expect, the Emperor doesn't take well to her comments. With her father's encouragements, she can eat freely, and to her surprise, the guests also seem to feel the same. In fact, their sentiment is generally turning against the queen for being so cruel. Later on, Sherbian is watching the nobles mingle in the hall when she spots a thief in their ranks, disguised as a waiter. She tries to follow him, but gets lost in the crowd and ends up returning to her room with Ellie. But she can't sleep knowing there's a thief in the palace. To have taken a risk this big, they can only be after one thing: the royal treasury. Sherbian remembers from her past life that there was a huge break-in at one stage, and lots of valuables were stolen, resulting in harsh criticism from the nobles towards her father. This time, she's determined to pay back some of the kindness her father has shown her. and put a stop to the break-in. On the second day of celebrations, only children from the noble families are supposed to attend. As usual, the queen has engineered things so that there's no one of Sherbian's age. All the guests are children of the queen's favored dukes, which just seems unnecessarily mean. Isn't it enough to ruin her reputation? At least let the girl have some friends. Luckily, Sherbian has her brother by her side, and he's fully in her corner today. Oh, and Karmen showed up. It's a good thing too, because she's going to need all the help she can get. Those snobby rich kids waste no time being rude about the princess, and even makes a dig at Karmen's lowborn upbringing. Bad decision, buddy. After hearing his sister and best friend insulted, Crown Prince Damian immediately calls a guard to drag him away. In the middle of that mess, Sherbian spots the thief from earlier through his status window, even though his face and hair are totally different. She gets Ellie to pick her up and take her to the treasury, where she ends up face to face with the thief, again in a totally different disguise. What is he, a chameleon or something? As a 6-year-old, she uses the best words she's got to warn Ellie there's something off about the guard. But when he realizes the jig is up, the thief whips out his sword and tries to take her hostage. His sword is about to slice Ellie in two when suddenly, a stranger appears to defend them. He tells the girls to run, but Sherbian can see the thief has something else up his sleeve. She calls out to warn the stranger, and he turns his head at just the right moment, avoiding some kind of lethal poison. Honestly, give this girl a medal. She's a total superhero. Damian shows up in time to deliver the final blow, disarming the thief and rushing straight over to check on his sister. The thief is captured, and once again, the day is saved by sweet little Sherby. The stranger who came to their aid was apparently an escort assigned to the princess, whose name is Adante Royd. He explains the whole situation to her father, who is shocked that his 6-year-old daughter managed to identify a thief just by looking at him. He sends her to her room to get some rest while he pursues the investigation. After being interrogated, the thief admits he was aiming for the royal treasury, but somehow, blinded by his love for his daughter, the emperor gets it in his head that he was after Sherbian all along. Oh, Adrian, never change. During the investigation, they're interrupted with urgent news. The thief was just found dead in the prison, and it looks like he was poisoned. Does that remind you of any other mysterious criminal deaths? Sounds like Sarah and the stable boy, doesn't it? Clearly, whoever helped the thief get into the palace decided to silence him before anything else could come out. After all, he had to have had help. He even had access to servant and guard uniforms. Suddenly, the princess's escort appears and tells the emperor that he thinks his daughter was able to read the incoming attack from the thief and forewarn him, almost like she read his mind. Kind of a wild thing to just pipe up and tell the emperor, but go off. To everyone's surprise, he actually agrees. Since Sherbian has such an affinity for mana, it is plausible that she might also be particularly sensitive to danger. The next day is the final celebration, during which only the royal family are allowed to attend. And they really go all out. There's a dollhouse covered in macarons, and even a chocolate fountain. It's like Sherbian's own personal heaven. Damian got her a huge teddy bear as a gift, and her father offers her one special wish as a reward for catching the thief. But, as usual, the queen interrupts to say a wish from an emperor is too great an honor for a child, which absolutely makes no sense. Seriously, where does she come up with this stuff? The crown prince and the emperor manage to shut her up, so she makes her wish, and it's not cake, or more toys, or any of the things you might expect. Sherby wants to see the royal treasury. Her father escorts her himself. The treasury has the royal seal on its doors and only responds to the mana unique to the royal family. That means only the royals can open it by infusing their mana into the blue wolf symbol. Inside, there are lots of magical tricks and traps to confuse any potential thieves. There are jewels and precious gems in every direction, but the real prize is the emperor's own treasures, especially the imperial scepter. That's what Sherbian thinks the thief was after. That's the one that disappeared in her past life. It belonged to the first ever emperor, but her father says it's not actually very valuable. Wait, then why would the thief be after it? And how was he planning to break in anyway without any access to the royal family's mana? I'm so confused. On their way out, Sherby spots the secret passageway that the thief was planning to use to exit, marked by the saponeal flower engraved on a candlestick. Once the celebrations draw to a close, the princess is gifted a large amount of assets and property. Who keeps giving all this financial responsibility to a little girl? Who makes the decisions around these parts? I bet it's the emperor. Now that she's incredibly wealthy, Sherby wants to learn how to manage her new assets and make good use of the money she's inherited. For that, she'll need a teacher. After doing a pretty poor job of sneaking around the palace staff, Sherbian's eye lands on a junior finance minister named Marco William, who's a little creeped out that the princess keeps following him around like a stalker. She asks him to become her teacher, but Marco immediately refuses. I'm pretty sure everyone has noticed by now that most people who get involved with the princess either get locked up or lose their lives. But Sherbian is determined. She even offers him a salary of $10 billion, and well, who could say no to that? After acquiring her tutor, Sherbian starts thinking about the change of seasons. With spring just around the corner, it's nearly picnic time, where nobles gather in the special millennial garden to witness the legendary flower that blooms once in 1,000 years. The saponeal flower. The millennial garden was created by the first emperor as a place for social gatherings under the magic of eternal spring. In her previous life, Sherbian was never allowed to enter. She hopes this time her father will include her in the festivities, so she goes to visit his chambers and stumbles into an official government meeting. Maybe she should come back another time? But the emperor insists and even picks her up to comfort her amidst the pressure of his advisors. She doesn't want to interfere, so she decides to just sit there until he's done working. Although, it seems like she's already interfering by staying on the emperor's lap. It does, however, give her the perfect opportunity to read the moods of the government officials, most of whom hated her in her previous life. This time around, they all seem just as obsessed with her cuteness as the emperor. She also gets to witness how an empire is run, and a chance to grasp the present political situation. And currently, there seems to be a lot of fluctuation in the price of grain. Because of the fluctuation in market prices, the meeting was extended and Sherbian fell asleep. When she woke up, she was still in the arms of the emperor. Before them is Hannibal Parcour, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and coincidentally, the same man who spoke out against Sherbian's 3-day birthday party. This is the first time Sherbian has met him, but she remembers right away that he's also the Empress's younger brother. Ah, now it all makes sense. The emperor can tell his daughter is nervous around him, so after they've met, he stuffs her with cake, his foolproof method for keeping her happy. Finally, alone, Sherbian asks her father the question she came for: permission to go on the spring picnic. At first, he doesn't answer, but then his favorability starts rising like crazy, and he agrees to go together as long as she fulfills one wish. They end up in the Millennial Garden with the whole royal family, including Damian and the Queen. The meadow is gorgeous, but Sherbian is struggling to appreciate the sights because she's embarrassed about fulfilling the promise she made. Which turns out to be way less intense than it sounds. He just wants her to call him Dad. But she accidentally calls him Papa and freaks out because I guess that's not the proper way to address an imperial parent. Honestly, at this point, who cares? Her dad loves it anyways and asks her to stick with that from now on. After tea, Sherbian is able to enjoy everything the spring picnic has to offer, especially the saponeal flowers. In her previous life, Sherbian met a fairy that lived inside one, so she still looks at them all the time, expecting one to pop out. Once, after her brother gave a precious flower to one of Sherbian's rivals, she went to the garden to beg that fairy for a single flower, hoping it would make her feel better to have one too. But the next day, the entire garden burned down. And I'm sure you can guess what happened after that. Since the princess was the last person to enter, everyone blamed her for its destruction. The more I hear about the things Sherbian was blamed for, I'm kind of shocked they waited that long to execute her. If I didn't know any better, I would probably hate her too. Because of her bad memories associated with the saponeal, Sherbian refuses when her father invites her to pick one. After the events of the picnic, the royals go home, and somehow the queen ends up in the same carriage as Sherbian. It's kind of uncomfortable, but it ends up being a gift. The queen is up to her usual tricks, and her status window gives her away. She also seems to know about the secret passageway and even blatantly admits she's after the treasure. This is one heck of a breakthrough. So Sherbian has learned 2 things. 1, the passageway from the treasury leads to the Millennial Garden. That's why there's a saponal on it. And 2, the queen was somehow involved in helping the thief. Wow, this goes deep. And who knows, her whole family could be involved. I wouldn't trust that slimy duke as far as I could throw him, so I wouldn't be surprised. Thinking quickly, she asks her father if they can have picnics more often so that she can monitor the passageway in case the queen tries a second robbery. Meanwhile, her lessons with Marco are off to a slightly dull start. Because of her princess upbringing, there's a lot she doesn't know about the world, so they have to start off super basic, like how a shirt is made basic. But she really wants to learn about the world, especially the way commoners live. Although Marco is wary at first, seeing his thoughts make it easy for Sherbian to quickly win him over and get friendly with her tutor. And as usual, she keeps winning fans left and right. Now that she knows where to look, it's easy to spot her escort, Adante, wherever he's hiding. That status window really is a dead giveaway. She uncovers his hiding place, which is kind of embarrassing for a knight of his status, and gives him a bag of caramels as thanks for saving her from the thief. His favorability immediately goes up. I guess moody knights can be sweet lovers too. And it's definitely useful to have him on her side. He already saved her once, and he's smart enough to notice her special skills. She really needs him in her corner, so he stops giving the game away. Jumping ahead a few months, spring has passed and now summer is on its way. One sunny morning, Sherbian is summoned to the Imperial Palace for a visit. A delegation from Garambel have arrived and asked to see her. The first person to greet her is a boy not much older than the princess. His name is Abel, and he's the prince of the Garambel kingdom. He greets her very formally, but Sherbian is too young to know how to answer, so she does what she does best and runs to her dad's lap. Okay, is anyone else kind of tired of that? I know she's a cutesy kid and all, but technically there's a full-grown woman in her head. Isn't that sort of weird? Anyway, the Garambel delegation are incredibly grateful for their aid against the plague. Actually, they're specifically grateful to Sherbian. All she has to do is ask how they're holding up, and they're immediately members of the fan club. Turns out, the delegation also has another purpose. They've been investigating the plague as the Emperor ordered and have determined that someone within the Imperial Palace was working against his orders. They even suggest they had something to do with the plague. While the adults are having heated political conversations, the young prince seems totally smitten with Sherbian. He comes to visit her quarters with some cake as a gift, because apparently, that really is all she eats these days. Though Prince Abel is very sweet and well-mannered, Damian doesn't take to him. I guess he's jealous that someone else has his sister's attention, especially since she isn't acting shy in front of him. The 3 of them have a very awkward tea party where Damian keeps giving the kid a death glare. But he's acting so adorable, I don't know how anyone could hate him. He even invites them to his kingdom someday so they can return the favor properly. Later that day, Sherbian meets up with Marco, who has just made big money by investing in a fashion trend on the princess's advice. See, if I went back in time to my younger self, this is what I'd be doing. Using that future knowledge to earn money. Because she doesn't want to draw attention to herself, Sherbian is acting through Marco to build up investments, but it makes him a little uncomfortable to take all the credit. Marco then goes away for a while, accompanying the Garambel delegation to restore their economy. Summer turns to autumn, and trouble returns for Sherbian. One random morning, the chief maid of the queen's palace arrives unannounced, summoning the princess to the gardens. Her maids don't want to let her go. It's against the rules for the princess to go anywhere without an appointment. But the queen's chief maid is just as nasty as the head witch herself. She insists, so Sherbian reassures her maids and agrees to come along. Anyone else have a very, very bad feeling about this? The queen's grudge has been building for a full year now. If she gets the princess alone, who knows what she'll dare to do? And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!